for joining me on Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. I'm your host, Dr. Carrie Kerr-McAvoy, and today we're going to talk about the common stereotype of the male narcissist. Is it true that men are more likely to be narcissistic than females? What does the research actually have to say about that? But before we get in, I want to tell you about an opportunity. I have just started a new club called Toxic Free Relationship Club. For a small monthly fee, you can join where you can talk to other members who are recovering from narcissistic abuse, take challenges to help you in your recovery process, and hang out with me at least once a month on a live webinar. To find out more, please check out my links in my website at carriemcavoyphd.com. You do this podcast a huge favor if you subscribe, and even better to leave us a review. Now let's listen in to this TikTok live on narcissistic abuse. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining me here today. And today we're going to hang out and talk about everything related to narcissistic abuse. And I kind of be curious where you're at and how you're doing with it. I'm Dr. Carrie Kerr-McAvoy. I'm a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of clinical experience. I no longer practice these days. I mostly create content, and I'm a writer, full-time writer. In fact, right now I've been working on developing a course on cognitive dissonance. But I find this whole field of narcissistic abuse very fascinating. And as a person who's experienced it myself, and then also working with those or seeing others who's struggling with it, it's hard to describe to those who've not personally experienced it. Although I've noticed that there's lots of us who've had this trouble. You know, it's hard to explain. I don't know if you've tried to talk to your friends when you're going through it about what it's like, the craziness that you feel, the agony, the indecisiveness, maybe even the confusion, the difficulty making decisions, the questions you have about who you've become and how you could end up in a situation like this, trying to figure out what you should do next. Does any of this sound familiar to you? Have you been stuck in this kind of situation? You know, it's interesting. In fact, lately, I've noticed, when I did a recent kind of survey of the research, you know how a lot of previous research said that the population of narcissists is about 0.5 to 1%. And more recently, I'm noticing that figure just changed. Are we surprised? The more latest research is reporting it closer to 6%. For men, I think it's almost 7.7% of men and 4.8% of women. Isn't that interesting? I find it intriguing on both counts. One is that's intriguing that the numbers have risen from 0.5 to 1% into closer to somewhere between 5 and 7%, but also that there's a difference between the way it manifests in men versus women. In fact, there was one study that looked at 475,000 participants over a 35 or 31-year span of time. It was a meta-analysis of research, and they looked at the various categories of narcissism. They broke it down by authority and leadership, entitlement. I don't remember all the areas, but the one that was the biggest difference between men and women. Men outscored women on all the categories, although women was almost equal to the men, and I'll have to look that up. But one of the categories men way outscored women was on entitlement. I thought that was incredibly fascinating. And then it went ahead and defined entitlement. The study said, and this is the study, I'm not putting my own spin on this. The study said that entitlement is the sense of that it's all right to exploit others in order for your benefit. And I thought, isn't that kind of intriguing that men tend to feel, at least those who have narcissistic traits of this 7%, 7.8%, have a sense that it's okay, that they're entitled to exploit others for their own benefit. That makes me wonder what's happening to us. Why is narcissism seemingly on the rise? Maybe we haven't understood it. We're just getting better identifying it. That's one explanation. Maybe there is something that actually is causing an increase. But the problem with it is, and especially with certain types of narcissism, is that they have serial relationships and certainly serial cheating. Not all of them, but some of them, which then means there's this whole host of victims, of people who've been affected, and resulting in all sorts of pain and agony for those who've run into them. And the other thing is they make it really hard to get away. In fact, I see, Vicki, that you just said that. They make it, it's when you're in a relationship with someone, it's interesting. They've objectified you. It's very transactional. It's like you're no more than like owning a car. I hate to be so crude. But on the other hand, when they don't ever want to they're willing to put the car out in the backyard, so to speak, and stop using it, but they don't ever want to let it go. Excuse me. They never ever want to let it go. So it perpetually belongs to them, and they make it very, very hard to get away. I found that to be true, Vicki, I had a rough time. It was really very hard. Oh, thank you so much. Very hard for me to get away. And I also knew it was dangerous. Now, I'd be curious how many of you feel that it's been dangerous for you. So whether or not you, if you risk finances, are you risking custody? Are you risking reputation? Maybe. I heard of one person how their partner actually was jeopardizing their job. They would show up at the work over and over and over again and harass this person to the point that the place of business found them to be a risk to the business and actually was risking their employment. And so I wonder how many of you feel that way, where you feel like you've been trapped and caught in this situation, and that even maybe your relationship with other people have been put at risk, or your community, maybe your social support system has been put at risk. Yeah, so those of you who joining me who don't know who I am, I'm Dr. Carrie Kerr-McAvoy. I've over 20 years worth of counseling experience. I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I used to do counseling full-time, but I retired my practice. These days, I write full-time and create content. And I'm currently working on a course of cognitive dissonance, which we've been talking about. We've been talking about what is cognitive dissonance without mentioning it. One of the things that happens in a narcissistic relationship is there's phases to the relationship. The initial phase is all about making the sale. I feel like I always want to back up and give a little bit of understanding of my theoretical understanding of narcissism and why, first of all, we're all on a spectrum. You and I are on this narcissistic spectrum because it's a developmental challenge that all of us have to face. Now, with me saying that, does that mean that it's based on nurture, that we've had bad parenting? Actually, the critics are out on that. They're not decided why narcissism is occurring. There's actually brain differences, structural brain differences between the narcissistic population and non-narcissistic population. They're finding it runs in families, that there's a genetic predisposition to it. So you can see it jumping generations and showing up in like stretches of families. But there also definitely is a piece of this that has to do that's environmental. And it's not just to say that's bad parenting. Sometimes it is that there is a miss between the parent and the child, or parents and the child, that it just wasn't a good fit. You guys know, those of you who've parented kids and have more than one, you know that some kids you just sort of get better and you know how to show up better for them, and then other people you don't, and you struggle with that. So it can be bad parenting. I don't want to let parents off on that, but it also isn't just as simple as that. And to say, oh, parents are bad, that's why they are that way, or it's abuse, it's too simple. The more you understand, here's what I found. The more I understood the human psyche, the more I realized I didn't understand that there is so much to us. We're highly complex. For us to simplify anything is to miss big variables. So right now, we believe it is genetic. We believe that there's something organically different about the brains. We also believe it's environmentally related. And you throw that into a hat, and it's lots of variables. Could be cultural too, for example. So what happens? Let's look at it from a developmental standpoint. So as you're a baby and you're growing, one of the things you need to know is that you're seen, that someone believes in you, somebody loves you, someone chooses you, you're special. That is a normal developmental stage that we all need to have. And that, by having that, we incorporate that into ourselves, and it gives us the confidence and boldness and assertiveness then to seek what we need. If we don't have that, if we've been beaten down around that, if we've been allowed to feel a lot of shame around that, then we end up with a wound, a very deep very unconscious wound. Because remember, this is pre-verbal, so there isn't language to talk about this. This is happening before you're really speaking or you have very big language. So it's a pre-verbal wound that happens that's rooted in shame and rooted in tremendous insecurity. So what do you do when you at the core are not for sure you're even worth it, if you're even lovable, or if anyone ever cares about you? What are you going to do? You're going to create a big facade to show up how people want you to show up, but you're also going to be hungry for what you're missing. So if, say for example, you're in a remote place and all that's available is a certain type of protein, but it's not a complete protein for life, you're going to be starving for the rest of the protein in order for you to live. You're going to look for that specifically. You're going to need that and hunger for that. So that's what these people are doing who have narcissistic traits. And by the way, none of us get out of childhood perfectly. We all have a bit of that hunger, and it shows up by the way in which we can see ourselves honestly. We're able to take risks, the ability for us to show up for other people. It shows up in all sorts of ways if we don't have this need met very well. So, but with those who are more on the pathological end of narcissism, it becomes destructive, very destructive. And one of the ways it's destructive is they don't see you as a you, they see you as an it. It's called an I-it relationship instead of an I-thou relationship. So it should be I-you, thou is you. Instead, they don't see you as you, they see you as it. And because it's that hunger, they're trying to solve the hunger. So as a result of that, that makes them do very bizarre things. It makes any of us who are closer to that end of the spectrum do very bizarre things. And one of the things is that we collect people. We sell people ourselves. We rapidly build rapport. We rapidly build trust. We get somebody to fall in love with us, and it's more because of our need than out of reciprocity. But once we get into the relationship, either when we get married or we have a child or something happens that cements the relationship, that affirms, it says, we're actually just talking, Miguel, we're just talking about narcissism in general, nobody specifically. We're just talking about the concept in general. But when somebody who's more narcissistic cements the relationship, then they relax. They feel like they don't have to put up the big sell anymore because they have you. And in their minds, they own you. You've become theirs. I know it's very odd to see it that way. And then once that happens, they start to let the mask, all that work down, because it's a lot of work. It's a tremendous amount of work. But what happens is they discover that you're not all that because they saw you as an it. So let's think about this for a moment. Say, for example, you're into the perfect sound system in the world. You really want you get it, you start to live with it, and then you hear about something that's even better and you think, oh, that's going to be even a more incredible musical experience. And so you begin to pursue that and you become less interested in this. We do this ourselves around things all the time. How many of those of us who game, how many gaming consoles do you have? You always think the next thing's going to be better. If you're into computers, you think the next iPhone's going to be better. So we move from thing to thing to thing, thinking somehow it's going to be more, whatever that is. But when we do it with people, it's horrible. It's a tragedy. Because first of all, that's not what love is. Love is about having someone back and getting to know one. And it's excuse me, I don't know why I'm struggling today. It's about a sense of having, reciprocity and being discovered by each other and finding incredible safety with each other and all of that. And unfortunately, to do that. See, if you do that, if you are on the more narcissistic end, what do you fear? If you fear you're damaged and there's something inherently wrong with you, then the closer someone gets to you, the more likely they are to discover that. I'll give you an example that was a very odd example in my life. So my second husband, I was widowed in 2015, and in my grief and pain, I leapt out and married way too quickly. And my second husband, I didn't realize at the time, was a narcissistic sociopath. And or he's also considered a malignant narcissist. So I knew he'd gone to college in here. I'd known he'd struggled. He admitted to me he had paid someone to write his papers for him. English wasn't his second language or first language, so I wasn't kind of terribly surprised. It's a common thing, unfortunately. But I didn't think anything of it, and I didn't care. Frankly, I didn't care. I mean, it wasn't really a big deal to me. We had great conversations. To me, that's what matters. It's not somebody's education. It's whether or not we can talk about ideas. And he and I were really great on that, actually. We talked a lot about stuff. But as he was getting ready to discard me, he told me something. He said that not only did he paid for someone to write the papers, but he later found out that the school he went to wasn't accredited in the United States, meaning that the degree he got was worthless. It wasn't even worth the paper that it was on. That essentially he didn't have a bachelor's like he said that he did. And he said to me, I've always been afraid you're going to find out. And I'm thinking, it has never mattered to me. I don't know why I would have felt bad for you that you got taken advantage of and didn't understand the American system to know about accreditation, and then you ended up in a diploma mill like that and got cheated. I would have felt sick. But see, he saw it as there was something inherently bad about him, and that I was going to discover this and think that he was worthless, that he was a piece of shit. So he'd been hiding it from me, and we had been collecting papers and stuff on him for something that we were working on at the time, and I think he got scared that I was going to ask for that transcript and find out. And I just thought, isn't that sad? I thought that was the saddest thing. Yeah, it didn't matter to me. But see, that's the degree of hiding that's going on. It's hiding not only from you, but it's also hiding from themselves. So I know I'm still trying to answer the original question that someone asked, is I've got a child and I got stuck and I don't know what to do. This is a long-ass answer to say it is really tough because they don't let go of people. And they don't because to let go, this is the reason why. Well, I just told you life is complex, and I'm telling you it's simple. It's not simple, but this is one of the many reasons why they don't let go of you. To let go of you means there's something wrong with them, that they can't maintain these relationships. And they're very deeply afraid that if you leave, you'll do better. And if you do better, what does that say about them? You know how if you ever have a job, you've had a job where you've worked at, and then whatever reason you leave it, and the next person comes in, and suddenly that department does gangbusters and does really wonderful, and you wonder, maybe did you hold the department back? Maybe you weren't as good as an employee that you thought. Maybe you weren't as good in that position as it makes you feel insecure. Now imagine most of us are healthy people. We can kind of take that. It doesn't feel good, but we can survive it. But imagine that at the core, you always knew that about yourself, that you weren't that good. And then the department takes off after you leave and it confirms you aren't that good. That's what they fear about you. If you leave and do better, that really says they're not that good. Now, the sad part is they aren't that good. It is true. And it's not true because they're wounded. It's true because they're defending themselves against the wound and they treat everyone shitty as a way to protect it. Isn't that, to me, that's the biggest tragedy of all of this, is that it's not about us being broken, because we're all broken. It's because we can't live and accept and share our brokenness and meet each other around the brokenness that they're so destructive. Sad. So what do? What I would recommend, if you're afraid that it's dangerous, I would recommend that you encourage the discard. How do you encourage the discard? You detach. You stop being supply. So whatever you're doing that sort of gratifies this person, are you pumping them up with compliments? Are you like listening to their job whenever they have a big problem? Are you, whatever it is that sort of like helps them feel enough, that it's enough with you, I would recommend that you pull that back and also don't engage around the drama. Mine was around, those of you who've read the story, I wrote a book called Love You More. You find out at the end that, and in fact, I hint to it in the cover, I say, the harrowing tales of lies, sex addiction, and double cross. There was a double cross in this relationship for me. When I discovered the play, the double cross, And I started pulling it in and making sure he couldn't get what he was looking for and how he wanted to use me to gains. When I sort of shut all that down, he was out of there. I mean, he was out of there fast. It was over. The discard then literally immediately happened. So if you can figure out what it is, maybe it is to look good, maybe it is to be the perfect parent, or I don't know what it is in your situation, but if you could think about, one, how you're emotionally feeding this person supply, how can you stop becoming hooked by them so they stop by the way, this is another fascinating topic. I'm about to do some videos on it. It's called counter empathy. Have you guys heard of counter empathy? It's kind of a new thing they're starting to research. They're finding out that not everybody has no empathy. They actually have the opposite of empathy. It's called counter empathy. So some narcissists actually have a lot of empathy. It's just that the empathy is, instead of getting pleasure out of like meeting you and understanding you and being having reciprocity with you, they actually get pleasure out of hurting you. Isn't that lovely? So are you gratifying that? Are you giving them pleasure by stirring you up and watching you be dramatic? That's why reactive abuse, that's why they smirk when they wound you up and you blow up into this big, huge, moment, and you're screaming, and they sit back and they tape it and they smirk because they got you. And that's counter empathy. They get into your head. They understand how you work. And then they activate you, and then they're pleased because for them, that pleases them to do that. So stop all of that. Stop. And I know, having lived it, I'm not telling you something easy. I'm telling you probably one of the hardest things you have ever done in your life. I know that. It was very, very hard for me. Very hard. And it is so hard when there's kids involved. Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Gray rock, no contact, everything. You need to do all of that. And if it doesn't, Jeff, I hear she's not leaving you alone. So what is that? How is she's getting under your skin? She's getting under your skin. So figure out what it is. Here, I'll tell you one of the hooks for me. I really didn't want to lose the relationship because I didn't want to be a failure around a divorce. I didn't want to have a divorce. I said I would never be one of those people. Actually, I'm on the other side of it, and I freaking don't care. So, to me, being widowed versus being divorced, widowed, way worse. Now, I'm not putting any of you guys down for divorces and how bad they hurt, but to have someone you have a good relationship with and then lose them, it's painful. It's very painful. But divorce is bad. I'm not saying divorce is easy. It's just different. It's very different. So anyway, I didn't want that. I really was invested, and I really was invested in the idea that I believed that we could change. If he just wanted enough, he could change. So I put a lot of time and effort into trying to get him to change. I was invested in that and had a hard time letting go. I'm not saying that's true about you. I'm just saying there's a hook for you. I don't know what it is, but there's a hook. And so she's hurting his feelings to get you now. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, and that's interesting. Yeah, to me it says that I'm also reading Once Upon a Reina, which I love that. Once Upon a Queen, that's beautiful. I know Spanish enough, just a little bit of Spanish, but it's really beautiful. So let me kind of look at another question, and so I don't for those who put that in there, I don't want to miss it. So Jenny wants to know, how do you move past a financial loss after financial abuse? Oh, Jenny, you're speaking my language. I lost a lot of money. Mine was broke. He actually had a really good job until we moved to another new country, and then he and I were working on a business that I funded. I funded the business, and then he took portions of it. So, it was very unfair. In fact, he even bluntly said to me, "Divorce has never been fair to him. Why should it be fair to me?" He felt he had a right to my money. He felt that it was unfair I had any money at all. So, I'm okay. I want you guys to know I'm okay. But They view life through a very unique lens, and it is all about how it's not been fair to them. Imagine you're in a large room, and normally everybody's in this room with you. The whole world's in this room, But for people who are more narcissistic, it's not everyone's in the room. It's only they're in the room. So all that matters in the world is they matter. No one else matters. So they don't see that this is impacting you. They don't care that it's going to affect you. Mine didn't care. He may have forced me back to work when I had actually retired. He didn't care. So, none of that seems to be. I dated him a year before I married him, and I didn't know any of this until 2 months after the marriage. I didn't realize that I didn't know who I met and married. So, yeah, it's interesting. Do you ever try to out crazy? I tried a little bit, but you know what? It turns you into somebody who do you really want to be that person? And then that's called reactive abuse, and then you become as dark and as evil as they do. And but yeah, I definitely had to do a bit of I had to have a long view myself and kind of have a plan of how I was going to get out and get out as safely as I could and as financially safely as I could. But yeah, they just don't view they don't view the children as yours and theirs. They don't view money as yours and theirs, or even yours before them. They don't view all of that way. They just view it from the standpoint of, what can I get out of it? Life's been not fair to me. I deserve it. I'm special. I'm entitled to it. It's hard to get into the mind of that, because that's not how we've been socialized. It's not how most of us see the world. We're very aware of, for example, if you come to me and say you had a bad haircut and you say, I don't know, I'm not for sure I like it, what do you think? For me to be very blunt with you hurts me. It hurts. I don't like that. I don't want to hurt you. That's not how they feel. They don't feel that way at all. It doesn't hurt them. Actually, that part of the brain doesn't light up for them. It actually doesn't activate. There isn't the distress. The distress that you feel in that moment, they don't feel that distress. So it isn't an issue. That's why they can do what they do, and the way that they do it is because it's just not upsetting to them. They're callous there, interestingly enough. So yeah, how do you get over it? I had to mentally forgive myself. That's how I got over it. I had to say, in fact, I had a big moment with my kids because it impacted my children. I'm in the age of my life where, what's left in my finances is the legacy that passes on to them. And part of it was their father's estate when he passed away. So I had this big moment with my kids where I sat down and said, I'm really sorry. I blew it. It cost a lot of money. It costed you money. I'm really sorry. You know what my son said to me, and I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful, and I'm thankful there are men like this in the world. They looked at me and they said, Mom, it wasn't your fault. He used the best parts against you. You didn't do this. It was done to you. And that's what. So I want you to hear that. I want you to hear that. For you feeling like you're stupid and you shouldn't have trusted him. You shouldn't have helped out so much. You shouldn't have, been so vulnerable financially or so vulnerable with your heart. These people have used the best parts against you. In fact, Hemingway, in my book, I have quotes in front of the chapter, and one of my favorite quotes, I say this a lot. This is what Ernest Hemingway say. You want to know how to trust someone? Trust them. You won't be able to know if you can trust anybody until you take the chance and trust them. And so that's what you did. You took a chance and you trusted them. And this is what happened. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it happened. I'm sorry it happened to me. I'm sorry it's happening to all of us. And I'm sorry it's happening to your children. I see so many of you have young children. I'm so sorry that all of this is happening to all of us. Yeah, so that's part of the healing. If we stay broken and don't trust again, then we have allowed them to win, and I don't want them to win. But yeah, so this is what I've learned. I'm gonna again I know you guys have questions for me, but loving someone for 31 years, it wasn't a perfect marriage. My first husband, loving him for 31 years, and then losing him in 5.5 months to cancer was devastating. Ultimately devastating. I cried every single day. And one of the things, because I'm a big thinker, I wondered, was it worth loving anybody? Was it worth falling in love with him if I knew I was going to outlive him by so much time? Do I really, and will I ever take a chance on love again? Do I want to go through that again? And then I realized this, if I had not done that, I wouldn't be who I am today. It has helped shape me. It's helped make me bigger, deeper, more. It's given me 3 beautiful sons. It was worth the risk. It hurt like hell, but it was worth the risk. Better to have loved and lost than never to love at all. We have to do that. Now, then end up in an abusive relationship with the second person who, like, obviously, if you read the story of my book, you'll discover it's a horrific story, shocking. You really think this doesn't happen to people, but it happened. And then you think, is it worth loving again? Should I ever take that risk again? Yeah, if I don't, then I say he's won. Now, I'm not ready right now, so I've been kind of quietly sitting and just working. And sorry about that. Opened my iPod, my AirPods, and it tried to take over here for a second. I'm learning to love myself, so that's where I've been lately, is just focusing on becoming more okay with my body and more okay in my mind and more okay with how I relate to people in the world. But I don't want to forever be on my own. It'd be nice to meet a partner and have a life with someone again. Because if I don't, then I've let them win, and I don't really want them to win. And I've also said that it's too dangerous to love, and I don't believe that. I do believe that we can all get better at learning to recognize the signs of danger, and we can get a little more cautious not with our love, but cautious with our trust, more cautious with our respect. We don't need to give people respect. They need to earn it. We don't need to give people trust. They need to show that they're worthy of it. So I'm learning to do that. And part of learning to do that is learning to recognize the signs of unhealthy people. And frankly, it takes time. It takes time to really know someone. I need to be okay with slowing it down and enjoying the road of getting to know someone new. So, yeah, how to teach someone how to recognize it. I think part of it is telling them not to rush, just not to rush, and to watch how, one of the big tips off, and I'd love to know if this was true for the rest of you, is how did this person treat those in their family and in the world? How did they treat those who waited on them? How did they treat the wait staff or treat the people mine blew up at the airline. He was horrible, embarrassing. It was one of my first tip-off is that maybe, and he also told me he was really cruel to the people he supervised, that he fired people a lot. That he had this saying, kind of bragged, they had 40 hours to get it together and learn the new role or they are out. I'm thinking, really? It took me a long time to figure out a job, and you're going to do that to people who are depending on this? This is their livelihood. They have families they're supporting, and so pay attention to that. If you see that, and that's with people who doesn't matter to them, they're going to treat you worse when they get to know you and you're familiar. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They put people down. You'll watch them sort of make smirks or be contemptuous. Watch for contempt. I think the 4 things that John Gottman identifies as damaging to relationships. Do you guys know the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that John Gottman and his wife Julie did this big longitudinal study on marriages and found out that there was 4 qualities that if you see these qualities show up in a person in a relationship, they don't bode well. And in fact, they got so good at this research that they were able to predict with 90% accuracy which marriages would make it and which marriages weren't. Isn't that shocking? So the four signs you want to watch for is defensiveness, but that hits home for a lot of us. So when someone brings something up, are you busy trying to explain it away and justify why you did it? Are you listening and kind of hearing what they said and why it upset them? Defensiveness is one of the 4 horsemen. The next one is criticism. Are you quietly criticizing people? Saying they could have done better, or it was good, but, and then you point out the way they could have done it differently. So that, because criticism actually is a one-upmanship. It says, I'm better, I know better, I'm the expert than you. Now, I'm not talking about if you're a bread maker, and when somebody comes to you and asks, about the bread they've made, that's different. But if it's just about ordinary things around life that you're doing together, and then you have to throw in a criticism, that's not a good sign. The next one is criticism, defensiveness. Oh, stonewalling. So there's 2 reasons why people stonewall. They stonewall partly, a lot of people, and particularly more men than women. Women are kind of trained to sort of get along with everybody. So we're always so it's not so upsetting or threatening when somebody has an issue with us, just because we want it to, we want to help them. We'll come and rescue and help them. But for men, it can feel like an attack. And when that happens, their blood pressure climbs and they feel like then they want to attack back and they're overwhelmed and they're flooded. So that's why men are a little more likely to stonewall than women. I'm not saying women don't stonewall, and they absolutely do. I'm just saying it's a little more common technique among men. And the reason is because so they don't know what to do. Well, the good tip, if that's what's happening in your marriage or relationship, they just back out because they're overwhelmed. Then one thing to do is to take 30 minutes off. Say, hey, let's shelve this discussion for 30 minutes. Let's come back, set a timer, and see how we're doing. And if the person's still feeling like I still can't talk about it, I'm just so like my heart's racing so much, then take another 30 minutes. But you need to come back and finish the conversation. So that's one reason, is people are emotionally overwhelmed. But the other reason is if the abusers use it as a way to punishment. It's a way of saying, this topic is being not going to be discussed. I'm putting it away. It's upsetting to me. Therefore, I'm not going to ever talk about it. They may say, can we talk about it later? And we all know that means never. It's never going to be able to come up ever again. So yeah, that's also one of the four horsemen. And then the final one is contempt. Now, contempt is one of the worst, by the way. It's the most alarming. So if you see someone in the early stage of your relationship showing contempt for something or someone, I would be concerned. And contempt can be as subtle as an eye roll, like, oh, geez, really? That's contempt. What I just did, really? I'm showing contempt. It says that, again, it's sort of a one-up position in which saying, I know better, and I can say you have no value. It says, you have no value. I think you're a fool. You're an idiot. So if you see someone who's showing a lot of contempt, man, I would be running for sure. Another sign to watch out for, if you guys want to teach yourselves or your children how to do this, is watch out for people who rush relationships and overindulge, overshare, and they rush intimacy. If they rush sex too fast, that's a bad sign. It's one is the way that they connect, that they struggle to connect emotionally, so they're using the physical realm as a way to connect. But if they're abusive, they're using that as a way to control and dominate and to kind of connect you to in a way that rushes the relationship, rushes the intimacy, rushes your trust and suggestibility. Those are some of the signs I would watch out for. It's hard to tell because, we all know that falling in love feeling. You're like, all you can do is think about that person. It's hard to distinguish that from love bombing, except that love bombing is inconsistent. So you'll sort of see them show up and then they disappear, and then they show up and then they disappear. And when they show up, it's like perfect. And then when they disappear, they don't really want you bringing that up or talking about it. So I would, those are some things I would watch out for. A good book on this, guys, is, do I have it right out here? I know, I thought I did, is Don Hennessy. Yes, I do, right here. Don Hennessy's book called How Does He Get Into Her Head? How Does He Get Into Her Head? He is from an Irish task force, and he works with domestic violence cases, and he deconstructs the grooming. He literally takes you from how they set up to groom to then offend. So it's fascinating. He kind of describes how it happens. Wonderful book. Really, really wonderful book. It's on Kindle. It's hard to get paperback because he's in UK, but it's a really wonderful book. So let me jump back to the questions. How do you deal with narcissistic family members? Ooh, boy, that is a tough one. And I have one that's a narcissistic family member. You have to, unfortunately, do the same things that you would do in a romantic relationship. You got to really limit contact or go no contact if you can, but limit contact and not let them emotionally hook you. You know how they're going to, there's things they know about you that they're going to, there she goes again. She always does. You ever notice how they'll do that to you, kind of embarrass you publicly, put you down. But become emotionally detached so that you can't be leveraged. That's what's happening, is they're trying to maintain control and over the situation and over you. So the best way to handle it is to not be controllable by not reacting to these things. Yeah, exactly. It feeds the narcissist. So when you react, you're feeding them. But it feels terribly unfair because what they're doing is not nice. It's awful. They'll set you up at the dinner table and then watch you sort of lose it. So if you can stop doing that, if you can stop being set up like that, then then they get no gains. It's no benefit for chasing you or stirring you up or antagonizing you. It just isn't. It's not really useful. I know that narcissists, if you have like grandparents who are, or maybe it's an in-law who is, I know often they'll threaten your relationship with other family members and triangulate and like smear you. And it's hard. Unfortunately, you can't stop that, and trying to stop it is also feeding into the dynamic and making it worse. So unfortunately, it's sort of a lose-lose proposition. I hate to tell you, unfortunately. It is really bad. Exactly. It's just bad. He's at the discard stage, but won't leave me. You know, it's interesting. I suspect that he's not leaving you because there's a way he thinks he's hurting you. If you could figure out what it is he gets out of this, I think that would really help maybe move the discard along. It may not be apparent, you know. It may not be something that you can directly see. So I would, if there's somebody that knows the situation really well and has a good kind of like bird's eye view of you and this dynamics of this relationship, you might want to ask this person, what do you think my partner is getting out of this? That might be helpful to get another person's perspective. Because if you could figure out what they're getting out of it and then you stop giving that to them, then that will really help you move it along. I know that people want to know, why bother? Why do we care about the discard? Because it's dangerous, that's why. Some of these people can be very dangerous people. And we don't want to put ourselves or our children or anyone else at risk. And so it does matter how all this happens. And when you discard, it's often worse. I'm not saying don't. But I am saying be very careful. Have a good contingency plan. Make sure you've watching your back and have talked to an attorney and know the proper steps and know how to file a restraining order, although I know they don't often do much and the police can't do a whole lot. I get that, but make sure you know what your legal rights are. My boyfriend's divorcing a narcissist and help staying safe. Yeah, that's what we've been talking about, is how to stay safe. I would really urge you not to engage. Don't weigh in. Don't post any comments about this in social media. Stay completely out of it. And let him do the work of that. He knows her better than you or him better than you, and let your partner figure that out. And even the fact that you're asking the question to me is like, yeah, I get it. You're invested, and it has a trickle down effect. I get that, but it's got to be his job, and he knows the situation way better than you do. So I'd really let them be the front of that. Why does he show anger with an upset child? Oh, that's yeah, I get that one. I understand. It happened to my house a lot. We weren't allowed to be upset in our house. The only feelings that we were able to have really overtly, we weren't allowed to be happy. We weren't allowed to be upset. We weren't allowed to make a big deal out of anything. Stoicism was the only thing that was encouraged. It's just like, the reason is because it creates emotions for them that they don't really know what to do with. And so it's just upsetting. And then it stops the show and diverts the attention off of them and onto the person who's distressed. So if you think about it, if a child's hurt, then you need to stop and you attend the child. And for that child's needs is primary above all things. So that means the narcissist disappears. They're no longer important. That's why they ruin holidays and your birthday and all sorts of stuff, is because the focus is shifted off of them for that moment and onto someone else or onto you. Exactly. You can't showboat an upset kid. Exactly. Oh, I love that, toad in a boiling pot. That's a great way of putting it. So because they can't take the control, because they can't get the control back. So as a result, they just shut the kid down. You're not allowed to make a mistake. You're not allowed to be upset. You're not allowed to have feelings. I bet any of you who've grown up in a family with a narcissist, you learned that quickly. You learned that, I learned to go to my room and cry. In fact, here's a wild thing about me. This tells you how really crazy my family was. If I start to cry here, and my face turns bright red, if I stop within like 5 seconds, my face is completely normal color again. Completely. It disappears. That's how well I hide my feelings. I cried in my room. I screamed in my room. I did not do it in public because there was no room for it. It was not allowed. Exactly. And I've learned to hide it so well that my body has now learned to hide it. I can hide my emotions really, really well if I want to. So kind of good news when you're a clinician, but it's kind of hard news when you're not. So, by the way, I just was asked to go live with someone. I don't accept kind of people to jump on with me. You need to plan ahead with me. So if you want to do that please talk to me beforehand, because I do post my schedule, and let me know you'd like to come on and talk with me. I'm okay with it. I just need to know ahead of time. I'm not one of these spontaneous people who does that. So I'm autistic. I don't know if you guys know that. And so change like that is hard for me. I don't like it being sprung on me. I like warning. So, yeah, so a lot of you, so Bella's Wisconsin, I hope you kind of heard the earlier answer that some of it's genetic, some of it's structural changes in the brain, some of it is environmental. We don't really know why narcissism is a problem. It's for lots of reasons. I was trained in thinking of it from a developmental standpoint, meaning of how we develop into human beings, that we have different challenges, different stages that we go through that we need to process well, and that one of them is feeling special and knowing that we're important and having attunement, our emotions being mirrored and attuned. And for a lot of this doesn't go perfectly, and as a result of it, it can cause narcissistic wounds within us. So that's one of the explanations, but it's very complex. There isn't one reason. So your narcissist wants weeks on and weeks off of parenting. What do I think about it? Yeah, I know I know this is a big topic, and there's really strong feelings about it on both sides. I know those are pro in the camp of 50-50, and then there's those who are in the camp of, a primary physical custody, and then they share back and forth every other weekend or holidays and summers and stuff like that. I'm actually a trained child psychologist first, and then I became an adult psychologist focused on adult population. So I worked a lot with children. Ideally, kids should have both parents, really, ideally, but that's not what's going to happen for most of us. So then you have to figure out how. One of the things I get concerned about is changing houses every 50% of the time is kind of chaotic. It requires the child to do a lot of work. This is my clothes at my dad's house. This is my clothes at my mom's house. This is how we do it at my dad's house. This is how we do it at my mom's house. Now, I know you're not going to get rid of that. I know that's not going to go away. But it is kind of nice to have a child have a home that they can know that this is my room, and this is my bed, and this is my stuff, instead of when they go 50-50, they literally don't have a home. They're floating between two homes. They have two homes. I think it's hard on kids to ask them to do that. I do. I know that means one of the parents is going to lose a lot of time with the kids. I know that. But there are ways in which you can make up for it, like calling every day, going to school events, every time there's a game, being there. Being the one that drives them to the dentist appointments or the orthodontist, or, showing up, stay involved, stay invested. Now, how do you do it with the parent who's shutting you out? I don't know. I know there's apps now that help with this. One of them I've seen advertised, it's called Onward. So I would wonder if there's something you can kind of get involved with that would help with the communications. But my personal preference for just kids, I'm just thinking children, is not doing 50-50. But you know what? What's going to happen is going to what's happen. It's going to what the court's going to decide. And who has a lot of power over that. So, yeah, it's a tough situation. Mental health worker partners as narcissists. Yeah, anytime you see a job or a profession that offers a lot of power and expertise, and you get people seek you out for support and advice. Look at what you guys are doing right now with me. narcissists are going to be attracted to those positions. So yes, you need to be warned that mental health area is one of the areas that narcissists are attracted to. They're going to be attracted to law and to medicine, to mental health, anything that gives, like I said, a lot of attention. I worked with some people who were narcissists. Yes, I knew clinicians personally who were exploitive and entitled and were doing illegal things. Yes. Yeah. So please be careful. Here's another warning. This is something nobody is talking about. I'm going to tell you a secret. It's not really a secret, but it's a secret. Nobody's talking about this. Do you realize that coaches are not regulated? There's no requirement state by state, at least in the United States, for a coach. Do you know that people who have been previously psychologists or social workers, licensed psychologists and social workers, who lose their license because of unethical or illegal things, often jump into coaching? You heard me right. So please be aware. Know your person's history. Know their history. I'm thinking names. I can name names of people who are doing that right now, who have lost their license for one or another reason. That means they broke the law. You have to do something really grave to lose your license. And because there is no oversight for coaching, they've jumped into coaching. That's why I say we have to be informed. You have to know who it is that you're seeing. Know their history. Ask questions. Be a savvy consumer. Really be a savvy consumer. And yes, I would say the same proportion of the population who's ill with narcissism, you're going to find that or more in these special fields. So it's good that you know that so you can protect yourself. Narcissists are often, if they're successful, if they're going to be a successful offender, can you lose your license for a lack of informed consent? Maybe you might be able to. Sarah, I would recommend that you get a hold of a licensing board in that state and then contact them and report it. They will then decide whether it's reprimand, supervision, censor, or actually revoking of license. That's how it works. So, but yeah, that's a big one. That's why that Milgram study can never be done again. That's the one where the guy hooked up a participant to saying you're going to shock somebody for the wrong answers and give increasingly painful shocks that might even hurt this person. The people didn't understand. It was hurtful to the participant to do it psychologically. So these days, you actually have to run your research projects through an ethics board. You literally have to write a paper, explain exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and why it's worthwhile doing it. And then they approve or not approve. You're not allowed to run research projects without running it through an ethics board. It's unethical. So, I would definitely address that with the state that person's licensed in. Yep, exactly. And every state has an ethics board. There's Milgram's study in Zimbardo. There's several that was done in the 60s and 70s. I think it's Milgram I'm thinking of. Isn't Zimbardo's the one done at Stanford with the prison one? There was one done with the people were prisoners and non-prisoners, and then what happened, it kind of just fell apart. And then there was another study, that the one I'm thinking of is where he asked people to come in and be teachers and teach a person a subject, but he was delivering shocks to increase learning, only they didn't know it wasn't. They weren't delivering shocks, and they were they were instructed to every wrong answer to get Milgram's get increasing worse shocks, and it was actually an effort to understand how people followed Nazism and followed Hitler. It was an attempt to look at our submission to authority and leadership, and they found out that 65%, I think, in the 60s, was willing to do what was asked, even if it harmed the other person. And they had the person pretending that they actually passed out or something went wrong, and the person continued to deliver worse shocks. It was awful. It's shocking results, but a horrifying study. Yeah, it's Milgram. If you want to read up on it, it's incredible results. I mean, it's really informed. Sadly, it's showed us a real dark side of humanity. But those people who did it, who got involved, were injured. They were traumatized doing it. So it's yeah. But now, after all of that, now we have ethics board. Ethics board has to weigh in and whether or not we're taking care of people's rights and protecting them and all that kind. And it justifies, the research justifies it. Let's see. Can I talk about covert narcissism? Yeah. Covert narcissism, I need to do more on that because there's a lot of misinformation on covert narcissism. Covert narcissism is probably the most insidious form of it, and it's very hard to recognize, extremely hard. It's more common than you think, and these people look really nice. They look like you and I, and that's why it's so hard to see them. What they do, but if you stand back, if you take the big frame of narcissism, which is need to be special, need to have attention, feeling that the willingness to exploit others for that. If you like the big tenets of it, and then look at the behavior, you'll see the behavior does the same. Different behavior, radically different. It's the opposite. It's the flip. So the overt narcissist is going to be bigger than life, hog the center stage, talk excessively about their accomplishments and who they are and how wonderful they are. They're going to do all of that. But the covert does it too, but in the flip. They do the reverse. They hog the center stage and talk about how life is going bad for them. It's always a crisis. They move from crisis to crisis. They exploit people by drawing you in constantly to rescue them, but they're never rescued. It's always perpetually being rescued. They don't see you and show you empathy. It's always about what's wrong with you, and they compete with you about what's wrong. So if you have something going wrong in your life, they'll one up you with something wrong in their life. It's always about the show. It's always not the show. It's always about they hold center stage, but they hold it around their victimhood, not around their accomplishments. So it's the reverse. So just see it the reverse. That's why it's so hard to spot, is because they're kind. They seem interested. They seem like people who are having something going wrong in their life, and we feel bad for them. We feel really, really bad for them. I knew of a family. I actually got involved in a counseling case with a family that was kind of talking about one of their kids had a chronic illness. And this is the degree that they're willing to exploit people. They told the story that the husband of the family was a surgeon and was working all these big hours. I found out later the guy was a tech in the operating room, that they had lied about that even in order to make it look like this really dramatic, like we're broken. They had the church fooled and all sorts of professionals fooled. And it was incredible, the degree that they were exploiting everyone around this catastrophe. And now I'm even wondering to what degree was the illness even real, or was it a little bit of Munchausen by proxy? I don't know, but it was bizarre. It was really bizarre. Often you won't see it to that extreme, but here's how I know. And I've met a few people online that I quickly recognize I now have a sense for it. They make me angry, so I start to get pissed off at them. I know I've usually met a covert. Usually what they do is they're really, how are you? I saw how you're doing. How's that going? But the reason they're asking is so that you have to ask them, how are you doing? That's the only reason they're asking. They're not asking because they really care. They're asking because they want you to turn it back to them so they can hold the floor. The minute you do it, oh, not good. Not doing well. It never seems to get better. And then I'll say, so what's going on? Well, I don't know. Nothing I do seems to work. I mean, it's just like, you just feel like wore out. Like all the energy in the room is being sucked out at that moment. But one time I was talking to somebody on the phone and they talked an hour, and finally I thought we started to talk about something with me. The minute I mentioned one issue, maybe 2 minutes, flipped it right. Oh, you should hear about how that happened to me. And then next thing we know, we're back on to this other person's issue. I just, at this point, it just hung up. It's awful. So watch for that. They're energy suckers. They're perpetual. They're the professional victim. They move from crisis to crisis. They exploit your compassion for attention. The supply is your compassion, whereas the supply on the other side is admiration. This is compassion. Just flip it. Literally the inverse. It's the inverse. You recognize them by how they make you feel. You feel like you don't exist. You feel like you never get a turn, and you feel completely exhausted. And that's how a covert will make you feel. So it's hard to recognize them because they're friendly and they're warm and they're very hospitable and they're not grandiose. So don't look for the grandiosity. It won't be there. How to work out if someone's an enabler or a narcissist? That's a kind of intriguing question, Bubbles. Enabler suggests somebody who's can't set limits, who's always rescuing people. Narcissists usually don't do that. They're not usually rescuing people unless it's because the supply, and then that would only be temporarily. Yeah, what do you guys think? How do you see a connection between enabling and narcissism? I don't usually. To me, they're very different dynamics. Enabling has to do with poor boundaries. They need to be sort of like, I don't, unless it's the hero narcissist. The hero narcissist is the do-gooder, but they do everything they do good because they want to, in order to be recognized as the person who does good. So that could be one way, is if you've met that. They're quite neglectful to their family, though. They don't recognize their family is all about the show of presenting good to the world. We have to hold up the image. You're going to see a lot of that. But interesting question. I don't really know how to answer it very well. I'm sorry about that, Bubbles. You guys' names are so hilarious. I love it. Small ways to spot and diagnose a narcissist. The biggest way to do it is watch their behavior. Do they share? Are they truly vulnerable with you? I mean, how do they react in the moment? Do you get to see them? See, here's what happens: is they often script your experiences. So they'll take you on a date, and the date will not be. You don't really get to see them in real life. You don't get to see what they're doing in real life. So then you can't really interact with them about real life. So it's always about the relationship, like, oh, I had a great time with you. You're the best. I love how you listen to me. But you don't really know how they're treating their family or how they show up at work with the coworkers. You don't see that part. They're very careful about what they're presenting to you. So watch for that. Are they blocking you from meeting friends and family? Do they disappear for periods of time and then show up? And do you feel like you can't ask any question under the sun, like there's good questions and bad questions? If you're feeling stifled, like you can't be fully present, even though you feel like over the top, like you've met your soulmate, but if you still feel like you can't show up, something's wrong. Then there's something you're reacting to something inherently off. Because real people you can be yourself with. It's easy. There's this kind of natural flow. And if you're not feeling that, then that would be, to me, a big sign that you've met someone who's maybe on the toxic end of things. What percentage of the population are narcissists today? That's interesting. I started out talking about that today. It's the rates are changing. There's been some big reports coming out lately. The one was in 2015 with the University of Buffalo School of Management did one. They were looking at 21 years of kind of meta-analysis. It was data, 31 years of data. And this is what they said, and I'm now seeing people quote them in other locations. It's not 0.5 to 1%. They're now thinking that for women, it's roughly around 4.8%, and for men, it's 7.7 or 7.8%. So it's close between, 5 to 8% of the population are. I thought that was fascinating. Yeah, and you can find it. It's out there. It's readable. You can actually get a hold of the article, and they break it down by types of narcissistic qualities, and then they look at specific. What they did was, this is interesting. They looked at a population that has to come in for treatment, and then they did an analysis on that population. So, because narcissists don't come in for help. So they looked at it like another problem and then looked at the percentage of narcissism in that problem. Now, maybe we could say, well, that may be true for that group, but it's not true for that group. The other thing that was fascinating about that study, they broke it down by occupations. They said, what percentage of occupations tend to attract narcissists? I don't remember the stats, but it was really a really well done article, and it was very interesting. I did provide the link to it on one of my videos, but I can always try to do that again. Yeah, if you're interested. But 475,000 participants. Huge, huge study. Over 31 years of work. So it is more than we think. It's certainly more than 1% that everyone likes to talk around, What are the subtle signs that you're being groomed? I'm going to take this as my last question, and then I will see you guys on Friday. But before I get into this last question, please, if you guys have not signed up for a seminar, there's a live webinar, April 6th. That's next week, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Lee Hammock, which is mental healness, Ben Taylor, who is raw motivation, Lisa Soni, Stronger Than Before, Kelly Kowalik, I never say her last name correctly, Lovely Lady Love, and Manjeet Rupai, and myself are going to be there. So 2 licensed clinicians, 2 life coaches, and 2 self-aware narcissists. We will be taking questions. And it's all about how to recognize and how to overcome. So if you want to get into the head of a narcissist and ask clinicians as well as narcissists about the inside view of narcissism and narcissistic abuse, this is where you want to be. It's Wednesday, next week, Wednesday. Link is in my bio. It's $20. If you miss it, there will be replays. So you can still watch it. You don't get the benefit of being able to chat with other people, but you also then, you do at least get to see what happens. But if you're there, the last 30 minutes of it is where we turn it over to you, and then you get to ask us questions. I've done this before with Lisa. These are amazing, guys. It's amazing. It's like kind of an intro to everything you wanted to know about narcissism. And what's unique about this one is it's actually specifically around narcissistic abuse with narcissists. So you get to talk to the narcissist about abuse. And I know for me, I have some big questions. I'd like to know, how could someone do that to me? What were you thinking when you did that? Did it hurt you when you saw you hurt me? I'd like to know that. Maybe if you get them to say it, give you an answer, maybe it can give you the closure that you've been really seeking, because I know it just drives us nuts afterwards. We walk away and we can't ever get anyone to say anything. The closest my ex ever said was, I can't give you the answers you want. Really? But I need them. He even said, I know you need them, but I can't give you the answers. But here you've got some people who are willing to slow down enough to dig deep and give you some answers. We may not like hearing them, but at least we can get some answers. So please consider going to that. It is next Wednesday, April 6th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Link in my bio for the tickets. It's $20. I'd love to see you guys. I really would. So what is the subtle signs you're being groomed? I think there are 2 big signs that you're being groomed. One is you are over the moon obsessed to the point that you're stopping your life all for this person, that you're literally breathing and living in order for the next moment with this individual. Yes, love does feel like falling in love does feel like that, but it's different. When I was going through it, it's different. It was so intense. Watch out for that. If it feels too good to be true, it is. It is. The other subtle sign you're being groomed is if you feel like you have to be careful about how you show up. They start right away with defining language, like mine right from the first date. You're not going to be one of those women, he said. You're not going to be one of those women. And then he defined the behavior. He's already grooming me, directing me in the kind of person I should be, the person that gives him control, that defers to his authority, all of that kind of stuff. Watch out for that. There is another sign. They rush to sexual intimacy really fast. They do that for lots of reasons. One is they want to bond you more quickly, emotionally, get you emotionally invested so that you're more likely to overlook certain things. They also do it as a way to sort of mark their, I hate to tell you this because it's going to sound crude, but this is what Don Hennessy says in this book. This is what he noticed with them, is they're marking the territory and they're claiming you as theirs. Yeah, I know it's really sick. And I'm sorry, it feels like totally crude and inappropriate, but that's the truth of the matter. So watch out for rapid intimacy. It's not deserved. Watch out for it feels too good to be true. And watch out for when there's this, you feel like you have to start being smaller and being more careful. Grooming signs with parents. Wow, that's a good question. Are you talking about with kids with parents? How do kids recognize it? I don't know if kids can. I think that's a really, wow. I'll come back another live and ask me more about that, what that is, and let's talk about that, because that's an intriguing question. Yeah. Mine rushed me really right away with sexual intimacy. Hey, you guys, I did write a book, and I'd love to have you guys get it if you're interested. It is a story. I tell it as a story. It's called Love You More, The Harrowing Tales of Lies, Sex Addiction, and Double Cross. It's available everywhere. You can get it in a link in my bio. It's also an audiobook. But if you want an inside look at what happens, I give you a picture. I tell you the truth of what happens. Yeah. So this has been awesome. And I've loved hanging out with you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for following me. Thank you for being here with my content. Thank you for all of it. Thank you so much.